was thinking maybe I should tell a story and not mention Donald Trump at all. But alas, we seem to be wed at this point. And he is the heart of darkness question. Who is he? What is he? I got to New York in 1973, and shortly thereafter, Trump began to emerge as an amusing and annoying figure. Kind of relentless, shameless, and I think relatively speaking, he might have seemed at the time harmless, except that his buildings were ugly and he put his name on them in such big letters. But it was a moment in New York where everything actually had begun to change. So a failed metropolis and bohemian capital was turning into a golden Oz, and many of us came to participate in this historic transformation. But Donald Trump set out to become the zeitgeist avatar of this, however ridiculous and campy he might have seemed. I mean, even then, it was like, what is this guy? Who is this? I mean, he was a figure out of Dickens for some new age. He became in the 80s. He became a fixture of New York nightlife. So as darkness fell, you could always find Donald Trump wandering through some gathering. I mean, I must have seen him 200 times over 20 years, and he was. I mean, there was something hulking about him and something always out of place, because first thing he always had a suit on in this ever-increasing suitless city. There he was, the suit kind of flapping behind him. He compelled your attention. This sort of a rough beast, this kind of dead eyes, a kind of shark moving through the crowds, and I assume he was like everybody looking for something, recognition, other celebrities, love. His 3 wives are kind of plucked from the nightlife. He came to be, he played himself a sort of soulless celebrity in Woody Allen's movie about this era, incredibly bleak movie called Celebrity. And it was a thing, even then. I mean, he just was playing himself, or he was making up himself. He wasn't real, and he wasn't something that you could actually write. He just, first thing, he seemed so incredibly implausible. Peter Kaplan, who became the editor of the New York Observer, would ultimately ban anyone from writing about Trump because there was a thing that as soon as you wrote about Trump, that became a cliche about Donald Trump. In the 90s, I became the media columnist for New York Magazine, and Trump started to call me up all the time. For no reason that I could figure out, except that my subject was the subject he was most interested in. And he would call up to complain and whine and cavil about either whatever the magazine had said about him, or actually more frequently when nothing was said about him. There's a conversation that I had with him or was involved with, which has kind of puzzled me for 20 years. And we were actually at Michael's Restaurant. Michael's Restaurant is a sort of a clubby restaurant in Midtown where all the mockers go, including me, or the would-be mockers. And so I was at a table right next to his, and everybody, because everybody knows everybody else, everybody is talking across tables. And then I remember somebody came up, it was a producer of reality shows of that moment who was incredibly successful. And somebody at one of the tables said, how are you, how's it going? And he leaned in and he says, it's amazing. You have no idea how much pussy I'm getting. And Trump, kind of ever the fabulous and ever the literalist, said, how much? So, I mean, obviously, I never thought Donald Trump would be president. Even after he had defeated the other 17 Republican candidates, I went to see him. I went to do an interview with him at his house in Beverly Hills. Who knew he had a house in Beverly Hills? And we sat around late one night, and he was eating ice cream out of a tub of Haagen-Dazs. And so this was a man on the verge of getting his party's nomination for president, but he was completely uninterested in talking about the presidency, policy, anything he would do as president. What he wanted to talk about is how famous he was. And it was this kind of thing he repeated, how famous do you think I am? I think I'm really famous. I think I'm... And then he finally got to where he wanted to go, obviously. He said, I think I'm the most famous man in the world. And then he went, Jared, am I the most famous man in the world? And his son-in-law thought about it in a moment and said, yes, I think you're the most famous man in the world. Anyway, and then he became the president. I might say, surprising no one as much as himself. Now, the presidency is actually a very narrow cast job. Nobody really wants to know who a president is. That's called being presidential. You're supposed to kind of hide. Lyndon Johnson, for instance, who in private had many Trumpian qualities, in public just always made sure to appear to act like a kind of oversized accountant. Bill Clinton and Richard Nixon came apart because they couldn't contain actually who they were. But Donald Trump is only who he is. There is no hiding. He wouldn't know how to hide. Certainly he can't hide behind politics because he knows nothing about politics. He's completely uninterested in politics. So there he is, and this became a major issue. The issue, certainly in journalism circles, the issue of the day. How do you write about somebody? How do you express somebody who isn't acting like he's supposed to act? I've done a lot of political reporting in my career, but it's not the only thing I do, and it's actually one of the things that I'm one of the subjects that I'm least interested in, and that's partly because it requires a sort of hyper rationality. You have to accept that wonkishness is sexiness, and it isn't. But you're also in a position, because you're seeing you're seeing human nature often at its lowest, and ambition at its highest insanity in all kinds of forms at every turn, but you have to pretend that what you're really writing about is healthcare. So that leaves you, that puts people in a position that you have, you have Donald Trump there. How do you approach this? How do you approach this guy? How do you really even begin to think about this guy? No less, how do you express who this is? There's a thing about political reporters that they, I think if you ask them, are you a writer first or a political reporter first, they would say they're political reporters. They would say their interest is in writing about how people govern. And that's all well and good, except that you then come back to the problem of Donald Trump. I have been, in the last number of weeks since this book came out, but throughout my career, I've been kind of, I don't know if it's the rap on me is that I'm not quite a journalist, or I'm a suspect journalist, or a dubious one. There's a lot of raps. And I think that that's kind of true, actually. That my interests, my talents are descriptive, and my ability, or at least my goal, is to move the character and the experience and the scene onto the page. In December, during the transition, so Trump is still in Trump Tower, and I was up there, and I saw the then president-elect, and I said, I want to come. I'd like to come to the White House and as an observer. And he thought I was asking for a job. I mean, he had no idea what people in the White House did, so maybe there was a job. Observer number one, observer number two, deputy assistant observer, and I said, no, I want to. I'm thinking about writing a book, and you could just see him deflate. And he kind of said, okay, yeah, whatever. So I took that whatever, and turned it into a kind of permission. So I called people in the White House and said, I'm writing a book about the first 100 days, and with the president's approval. And in fact, everybody said, oh, okay. And I'm sure in some way the president sort of said, somebody said, oh, Michael Wolff says he's writing a book with your approval. Oh, yeah, whatever. And that literally allowed me to pass into the White House and become this kind of fixture there. And I never thought of myself as breaking rules. But on the other hand, I didn't think of myself as like like those people in the press corps, which is just really 40 feet away from the couch that I was sitting on in the West Wing. And I guess I sort of started to feel that I was an undercover agent, I guess. With the same dilemmas of an undercover agent. Like, you start to think, which side am I on here? And Reince Priebus, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, was I going to sell them out, or was I going to become their friend? Or both? And it really was, you're really left in this kind of weird status that you don't know what's going to happen here. You're really, you can really go actually either way. And there were several moments. There were several moments when I felt I could have written an entirely different book than in fact I wrote. And again, this is I find myself in this position in which there is something, people seem to find something suspect about this. I caught an interview the other day with Jake Tapper, the CNN newscaster, and he seemed ruffled by me and my book, and among other things. And he said, if the people in the White House are not going to obey standards and follow standards, we had to do that. And I was listening to this, and I was thinking, who's we? And I was thinking, I don't watch television news very much, but I've seen Jake, and he seems like a reasonable newscaster. But what he doesn't seem to be is a writer. And I thought, well, wait a minute, we do entirely different things here. And I began to wonder about my particular role there, and began to see it as different from other people's role, other journalists, and neither right or wrong, but to see the job as the job of being a writer in this circumstance as a unique one. And I couldn't tell you, am I complicit? Am I a double agent? Am I some kind of thief who's gotten in there and stolen the china? And then I also thought, and so what if I am? Isn't that the price, certainly the price one should be willing to pay to get the goods, to get the story, to get it on the page, to really get close to finding out who this guy in the heart of darkness is. I thought when I went into this project that in order to do this, in order to come close to Trump, I was going to have to write a book that was as unexpected, as louche, as large as Trump himself, to get his attention. And I think I would know that I had succeeded when tomorrow or next week or a month from now, I get the call, and the call will be from Donald Trump claiming credit for my book. And I know that he will whine and cavil and complain, and then he will ask me to stop by again, and we're off to the races once more.